Jai. We start with 7 realities. Ashok, your turn to read today. Is that fine?
Oh, good. The 7 realities.
1 second.
Existence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jai Baba. Avatar Jai. Mere Baba ki Jai.
Jai Baba.
Okay. The 7 realities.
I think
Existence, love.
Karthik.
Yes.
There's some noise somewhere.
Yeah, Rahul, you said something. Yeah, go ahead, Ashokji.
I know I have to see the screen. I can't see.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. And you'll have to keep scrolling
Yes,
it down,
I
please.
will.
Thank you.
I will.
Okay, the 7 realities. Avatar Mehr Baba ki Jai. The 7 realities. Existence, love, sacrifice.
Okay, there's audio issues on his side. So I'll just jump in and complete it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Karthik.
Existence, love, sacrifice, renunciation, knowledge, control, and surrender. I give no importance to creed, dogma, caste, or the performance of religious ceremonies and rites, but to the understanding of the following 7 realities. The only real existence is that of the one and only God, who is the self in every finite self. The only real love is the love for this infinity, God, which arouses an intense longing to see, know, and become one with its truth, God.
I'm sorry.
No
Jai Baba,
problem.
I'll start again.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I'll finish it off. Only real sacrifice is that in which, in pursuance of this love, all things, body, mind, position, welfare, and even life itself are sacrificed. The only renunciation is that which abandons, even in the midst of worldly duties, all selfish thoughts and desires. The only real knowledge is the knowledge that God is the inner dweller in the good people and in so-called bad, in saint and in so-called sinner. This knowledge requires you to help all equally as circumstances demand without expectation of reward. When compelled to take part in a dispute, to act without the slightest trace of enmity or hatred, to try to make others happy with brotherly or sisterly feeling for each one, and to harm no one in thought, word, or deed, not even those who harm you. 6. The only real control is the discipline of the senses to abstain from indulgence in low desires, which alone ensures absolute purity of character. 7. The only real surrender is that in which poise is undisturbed by any adverse circumstance, and the individual, amidst every kind of hardship, is resigned with perfect calm to the will of God. Tar Meher Baba ki Jai. With that, I'm sorry, Ashokji. I just want to make sure we just move on. So next time I'll surely give you a chance. How do I get rid of this?
Something went wrong with the power. Jai Baba.
I don't need it. Okay. Okay. So we are in page 379. We are reading Maya. We did 2 parts of Maya, first and second, and we are getting to the 3rd part. Is the Zoom all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
thank
it's
you.
okay.
Okay. Part 3, Transcending the Falsehoods of Maya. Countless are the falsehoods that a Maya-ridden person embraces in the stupor of ignorance. Discerning falsehood is the subtitle. And from the very beginning, falsehoods carry within themselves their own insufficiency and bankruptcy. Sooner or later, they are known to be falsehoods. This brings one to the question, how does one discern the falsehood as falsehood? There is no way out of falsehood except by knowing it as falsehood, but this knowledge of falsehood as falsehood would never come unless it was in some way latent in falsehood itself from the very beginning. I want to read this line again. This brings one to the question, how does one discern the falsehood as falsehood? There is no way out of falsehood except by knowing it as falsehood, but this knowledge of falsehood as falsehood would never come unless it was in some way latent in falsehood itself from the very beginning. Okay. I hope everybody got it. It's basically that yeah, go ahead.
Falsehood you can replace as illusion. Then also it means
yes,
this.
same thing. Yes, correct. The next title is In Falsehood, There is Suspicion and Fear. The acceptance of falsehood is always a forced compromise. Even in the very depths of ignorance, the soul gives some kind of challenge to falsehood. However feeble and inarticulate it might seem to be in its initial stages, it is the beginning of that search for truth, which ultimately annihilates all falsehood and all ignorance. In the acceptance of a falsehood, there is an ever growing restlessness, a deep suspicion, and a vague fear. For example, when an individual considers himself and others to be identical with the gross body, he cannot completely reconcile himself to this belief. In embracing this false belief, there is a fear of death and fear of losing others. If a person depends for his happiness only upon the possession of forms, he knows in his heart that he is building his castles on shifting sands, and that this surely is not the way to abiding happiness. That the support he so desperately clings to may give way any day. Hence, he is deeply suspicious of his grounds. Somebody at the door.
Yeah. So basically, it's that the truth always prevails. I think that's the one of the takeaways from this. The truth always prevails and is supreme.
Correct. Falsehood betrays itself. The individual is restlessly aware of his own insecurity. He knows that something is wrong somewhere and that he is counting upon false hopes. Falsehood is treacherously unreliable. He simply cannot afford to embrace it forever. He might as well garland himself with a poisonous snake or go to sleep on top of a volcano that is only temporarily inactive. Falsehood bears the hallmark of being incomplete and unsatisfactory, temporary and provisional. It points to something else. It appears to the person to be hiding something greater and truer than what seems to be. Falsehood betrays itself and in doing so leads one on to know the truth. Falsehoods are of two types, those that arise due to irregular and loose thinking and those that arise due to vitiated thinking. Falsehoods that arise due to irregular thinking are less harmful than those that arise from vitiated thinking. The untruths of a purely intellectual nature arise because of some mistake in the application of the intellect, whereas falsehoods that are important from the spiritual point of view arise because of the vitiation of the intellect through the operation of blinding and unreasoning desires. Okay, someone else. Yeah, so did everybody get the two types of falsehoods? So I think he's used a tough word, vitiated thinking. So anybody wants to distinguish the two? One is irregular thinking and the other is vitiated thinking. Is that more like scheming or is that more like thinking four steps away and thinking of a falsehood based on that? Is that what he's suggesting?
I also think that it means, Baba has emphasized and has been absolutely against all hypocrisy. Even in his prayers, he talks about hypocrisy. So maybe hypocrisy is a form of falsehood.
Correct.
Yeah, I think irregular and loose thinking is something which just happens by nature, and vitiated is more, deliberate kind of. I think
Correct.
the
Okay.
vitiated is
That's a good.
that's what I think. Yeah.
That's a good
If I
distinction.
may add,
More
I think
commonplace.
Yeah.
More commonplace is the loose and irregular, and then
Yeah.
vitiate. Yeah.
Vitiated is some of the.
I think visual thinking would signify or connote Machiavelli, something which is with ill intent.
Correct. Fair enough. Thank you. Good. So we'll continue. Analogy of functional and structural diseases. The difference between these two types of falsehood may be brought out by a physiological analogy. Some disorders of the vital organs of the body are functional and some are structural. We jump to conclusions. He's explaining it. Functional diseases arise because of some irregularity in the functioning of a vital organ. In these cases, there is nothing seriously wrong with the structure of the vital organ. It has merely become sluggish or irregular and needs only slight stimulation or correction in order to function properly. In structural disorders, the disease comes into existence because of the development of some deformity in the structure or constitution of the vital organ. In these cases, the disorder of the vital organ is of a much graver nature. It has become damaged or rendered inefficient due to some tangible factor that has affected the very constitution of the organ. Both types of diseases can be corrected, but it is far easier to correct merely functional disorders than to correct structural ones. Importance of purifying intellect. So I think that's a good distinction. Fundamental damage thinking is vitiated thinking, and just temporary, just something that can be fixed by just some positive stimulation, small treatment is just basic irregular and loose thinking, loose falsehood. Yeah. Okay. Importance of purifying intellect. Falsehoods that arise due to some irregularity in the application of the intellect are like functional disorders, and falsehoods that arise due to the vitiation of the intellect are like the structural ones. Just as the functional disorders are easier to correct than the structural, falsehoods arising out of irregularity in the application of the intellect are easier to correct than those that arise due to the vitiation of the intellect. In order to correct a functional disease of a vital organ, all that is necessary is to give it a better tone and strength. If there is a structural disease, it is often necessary to perform an operation. In the same way, if falsehoods arise due to some mistakes in the application of the intellect, all that is necessary is more carefulness in the application of the intellect. But if falsehoods arise due to vitiation of the intellect, it is necessary to purify the intellect. This requires the painful process of removing those desires and attachments that are responsible for vitiating the intellect. Requesting a mute somebody's mic. The falsehoods of vitiated thinking, the citadels of Maya is the title. The falsehoods of vitiated thinking spring from initial mistakes in valuation. They arise as a byproduct of intellectual activity which consists in the pursuit of certain accepted values. They come into existence as a part of the rationalization and the justification of accepted values, and they owe their hold upon the human mind to their apparent support of those accepted values. If they did not affect human values or their realization, they would immediately dwindle into insignificance and lose their grip upon the mind. When false beliefs derive their being and vitality from deep-rooted desires, they are nourished by false seeking. If the error in false beliefs is purely intellectual, it is easy to set right. But false beliefs that are nourished by false seeking are the citadels of Maya. They involve much more than intellectual error and are not diminished by mere counter assertions of a purely intellectual nature. So the more tough beliefs are the ones this line is the important line. So if you look at false beliefs that are nourished by false seeking are the citadels of Maya. I think I removed all the toolbars. Just give me 1 second.
So it is based
Okay.
more on seeking, that is desire. So desire is the force which makes you believe that it is the proper thing.
Correct. Perfect.
I think an example of false beliefs that are nourished by false seeking will be the the Islamic fundamentalists, those people who have been told that for jihad they will go to heaven and meet all those 76 maidens or something like that. That is like a false belief system, as an example.
Yeah. And that false belief is difficult to get rid of because it's not just it is based on a seeking. So that's example of a citadel. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Clarity of perception from inner purity. Elimination of desires and attachments that vitiate thinking is not accomplished purely by sheer intellect. This requires right effort and right action, not by armchair speculation, but by the doing of right things shall spiritual truths be discovered. Honest action is a preliminary to the elimination of spiritual falsehoods. The perception of spiritual truths requires not merely strenuous and furious thinking, but clear thinking, and true clarity of thought is the fruit of a pure and tranquil mind. Okay? God as only truth. Not until the shedding of the last vestige of Maya created falsehood is God known as the truth. When
Can't hear
Maya
you.
others can
Now
can
okay.
okay.
Now
I'll repeat the last para. Not until the shedding of the last vestige of Maya created falsehood is God known as the truth. Only when Maya is completely overcome does there arise the supreme knowledge that God is the only truth. God alone is real. All that is not God, all that is impermanent and finite, all that seems to exist within the domain of duality is false. God is one infinite reality. All divisions that are conceived within this reality are falsely conceived. They do not actually exist. God is indivisible. When God is considered as divisible, it is due to Maya. The variegated world of multiplicity does not affect the partitioning of God into several different portions. There are different ego minds, different bodies, different forms, but only one soul. When the one soul, God, takes different ego minds and bodies, there are different individualized souls. However, this does not introduce any multiplicity within the one soul itself. The soul is and always remains indivisible. The one indivisible soul is the base of the different ego minds and bodies which do the thinking and acting of various types and which go through innumerable types of dual experiences. But the one indivisible soul is and always remains beyond all thinking and doing and beyond all dual experience. No opinions or ways of thinking within soul. Different opinions or different ways of thinking do not introduce multiplicity within the one indivisible soul, for the simple reason that there are no opinions or any ways of thinking within the soul. All the activity of thinking and conclusions drawn therefrom are within the ego mind, which is finite. The individualized soul, as soul, does not think. It is only the ego mind that thinks. Thinking and the knowledge that comes through thinking are both possible in the state of imperfect and incomplete knowledge that belongs to finite ego minds. In the individual soul itself, there is neither thinking nor the knowledge that comes through thinking. The individualized soul as soul is infinite thought and infinite intelligence. There is no division between the thinker and the thinking and the conclusions of thinking, nor the duality of the subject and object. Only the ego mind with the background of the soul can become the thinker. The individual soul as soul, which is infinite thought and infinite intelligence, does not think or have any activity of the intellect. Intellect, with its limited thinking, comes into existence only with the finite ego mind. In the completeness and the sufficiency of the infinite intelligence, which is the one soul, there is no need for the intellect or its activities. So this title was Soul is Infinite Thought and Intelligence. So God, the only reality, is the subtitle here. With the shedding of the last vestige of falsehoods created by Maya, the individualized soul not only knows its reality to be different from the gross, the subtle, or the mental body, but it knows itself to be God, who is the only reality. In this state, the soul knows that the mind, the subtle body, and the physical body were all equally the creations of its own imagination, and that in reality they never existed. It knows that through ignorance it conceived itself as the mind, or the subtle body, or the physical body. The individual soul knows also that in a sense it became the mind, the subtle body, and the gross body, and then identified itself with all these self-created illusions. And I think that's the end of this chapter. And we go to part 4. I pause. Yeah.
So basically, here what they are trying to say is that it's the soul in the body and not the body in the soul. Is that what it comes out?
What's that again?
I said that, basically the soul is in the body and not the body in the soul. I mean, so there's that's what sort of comes out from this.
So I think it's broader than that, right? The soul is the soul with the capital S is the infinite. The soul with the small s is temporarily encapsulated in a complex which includes the bodies, gross, mental and subtle. With that, I'll stop and let Kama answer, or anybody else.
I think that one point here is the terminology used here, the individualized soul as capital S soul. I think this is equivalent to the drop soul before the whim,
Yes.
So, that is one of the challenges here when you go between discourses and God speaks. The terminologies kind of change, but it means the same thing. So when it says the individualized soul as capital soul, it means like the drop soul without before the evolution process. And then, so I think that is the only thing I can think of out here.
There is one paragraph in the earlier page where it refers to the soul, yes, capital soul. I think we need to read that once again.
So is this the one you're talking about? I went back already. The individualized soul as soul is infinite thought and infinite intelligence. Is that what you're referring?
And there is
no division between the thinker and the thinking, and the conclusions of thinking, nor the duality of the subject and object. Only the ego mind with the background of the soul can become the thinker.
No, so you go earlier, before this.
Okay.
Keep going up.
Yeah, this is just about thinking. God is indivisible. God is indivisible.
Yeah, I think no. Once again.
Yeah.
Just go down again, please. I think probably Doc is mentioning one more, please.
One more down.
Right?
Okay.
Down.
Individualized souls.
This one.
Yes.
I think when he's probably, I guesswork is when the one soul, bracket God,
Hmm.
takes different ego, minds, and bodies.
Yes,
So I
yes,
think this
yes.
should be the oversoul, you know.
Yes, that should be the oversoul.
Yeah.
So
There are
this is the,
different individualized souls. When the one soul
you can
God,
read the paragraph once again.
sure,
When
makes
the
sense.
one soul God takes different ego, minds, and bodies, that is different.
Individualized
The
souls.
drop souls. There are
Correct.
different individualized souls. However, this does not introduce any multiplicity within the one soul itself. That is the oversoul. The
Correct.
soul is and always remains indivisible.
Correct.
The one indivisible soul is the base for the different ego, minds, and bodies, which do not think, do the thinking and acting of various types and which go through innumerable types of dual experiences. But the one indivisible soul is and always remains beyond all thinking and doing and beyond all dual experiences. So this is the oversoul. This statement is regarding the oversoul and how the drop souls come out of it and start all the activities of thinking and other things and land in problem.
Correct.
Actually, technically, the way the sentence, I think this paragraph is a little bit confusing
Ah.
because when you look at God speaks, after the whim,
Ah.
it divides into infinite consciousness, which is the Paramatma, and the infinite unconsciousness.
Yes.
So, this infinite unconsciousness is the one which takes different ego, minds, and bodies.
Yes.
Because the infinite consciousness before the whim doesn't have any impressions. Only
Yes.
after the whim, you know. So, you're right. I think what Doc pointed out is correct, you know, because the one indivisible soul, you can't call it as oversoul itself. It has to be the infinite unconsciousness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good.
So the
reference back.
stream of unconsciousness or developing consciousness, that stream picks up all the say dirt in the illusion and then keeps accumulating them. Unless they get out of that, they cannot go further.
Due to thinking and the dual activities in those
Yes.
individualized souls.
Yes.
Yeah. Correct. Great. So with that, I think we can go to the part 4. Part 4, God and Maya. God above duality. God is infinite because he is above the limiting opposites of duality. He is above the limited aspects of good and bad, small and great, right and wrong, virtue and vice, happiness and misery. Therefore, he is infinite. If God were good rather than bad, or bad rather than good, or if he were small rather than great, or great rather than small, or if he were right rather than wrong, or wrong rather than right, or if he were virtuous rather than evil, or evil rather than virtuous, or if he were happy rather than miserable, or miserable rather than happy, he would be finite and not infinite. Only by being above duality is God infinite. So
If I,
good detailed explanation. Yeah.
the way I look at it is, God has no adjectives. So if you remove all adjectives, that is the state of God.
Or in another sense, is the sum of all adjectives.
Yes, sum of all adjectives. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So if you cannot use an adjective to describe him, or if you have to use, you have to use all adjectives.
All adjectives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Okay.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Now, I've been thinking of this from quite some time. I think I mentioned it earlier. I think the terms in a dictionary are what are the individualization of the aspect of individualization of souls from the infinite is. And our process, the whole advancing stream of consciousness is to finish the dictionary. Once the dictionary is finished, you realize you're full. It's a very vague but correct thing. So nobody can finish it quickly, and it's so difficult. That's why it's a lottery ticket. So you keep reading. Sorry if I don't make sense, but to me, I could relate to that. Anyway, I'll continue. Infinite cannot be dual part of finite. Whatever is infinite transcends duality. It cannot be a part of duality. What which is truly infinite cannot be the dual part of the finite. If the infinite is regarded as existing side by side with the finite, it is no longer infinite, for it then becomes the second part of duality. God, who is infinite, cannot descend into duality. So the apparent existence of duality as infinite God and the finite world is illusory. God alone is real. He is infinite, one without a second. The existence of the finite is only apparent. It is false. It is not real. This is a very, very powerful para, and if you don't mind, I will read it again. Whatever is infinite transcends duality. It cannot be a part of duality. That which is truly infinite cannot be the dual part of the finite. If the infinite is regarded as existing side by side with the finite, it is no longer infinite, for it then becomes the second part of duality. God, who is infinite, cannot descend into duality. So the apparent existence of duality as infinite God and the finite world is illusory. God alone is real. He is infinite, one without a second. The existence of the finite is only apparent. It is false. It is not real. How does the false world of finite things come into existence? The next section is world of finite things created by Maya. How does the false world of finite things come into existence? Why does it exist? It is created by Maya, or the principle of ignorance. Maya is not illusion. It is the creator of illusion. Maya is not false. It is that which gives false impressions. Maya is not unreal. It is that which makes the real appear unreal and the unreal appear real. Maya is not duality. It is that which causes duality. Again, a very descriptive thing which we have to internalize. So I don't, if everybody doesn't mind, I'll repeat this. How does the false world of finite things come into existence? Why does it exist? It is created by Maya, or the principle of ignorance. Maya is not illusion. It is the creator of illusion. Maya is not false. It is that which gives false impressions. Maya is not unreal. It is that which makes the real appear unreal and unreal appear real. Maya is not duality. It is that which causes duality. Right? So I think all of these...
We can take this as the tool of the Leela.
Yes. So I think we can mark this. I'll mark it up later. I don't want to hold everybody. Illusion of finitehood. For the purposes of intellectual explanation, however, Maya must be looked upon as being infinite. It creates the illusion of finitehood. So again, now he's taking the other stand. For the purposes of intellectual explanation, however, Maya must be looked upon as being infinite. It creates the illusion of finitehood, yet it is not in itself finite. All the illusions created by Maya are finite, and the entire universe of duality which appears to exist due to Maya is also finite. The universe may seem to contain innumerable things, but that does not make it infinite. Stars may be countless. There are a huge number, but the total collection of stars is nevertheless finite. Space and time seem to be infinitely divisible, but they are nevertheless finite. Everything that is finite and limited belongs to the world of illusion. Though the principle that causes this illusion of finite things must, in a sense, be regarded as not being an illusion. I'll read the last line. Everything that is finite and limited belongs to the world of illusion, though the principle that causes this illusion of finite things must, in a sense, be regarded as not being an illusion. So he's just repeating the earlier assertion. Maya not limited by space and time. Maya cannot be considered as being finite. A thing becomes finite by being limited by space and time. Maya does not exist in space and cannot be limited by it. Maya cannot be limited in space because space itself is the creation of Maya. Space, with all that it contains, is an illusion and is dependent upon Maya. Maya, however, is in no way dependent upon space. Hence, it cannot be finite through any limitations of space. Nor can, nor can Maya be finite because of any limitations of time. Though Maya comes to an end in the state of superconsciousness, it need not be considered finite for that reason. Maya cannot have a beginning or end in time because time itself is a creation of Maya. Any view that makes Maya a happening that takes place at some time and disappears after some time puts Maya in time and not time in Maya. Time is in Maya. Maya is not in time. Time, as well as all happenings in time, is the creation of Maya. Maya is in no way limited by time. Time comes into existence because of Maya and disappears when Maya disappears. God is timeless reality, thus the realization of God and the disappearance of Maya is a timeless act. Okay. Very profound.
Yes, yes.
We'll keep going. Any discussions? Happy to pause. Next section is Maya as infinite, ultimately untrue. So he says for intellectual purpose, we'll treat it as Maya as infinite. Now he's saying ultimately it's untrue. Nor can Maya be considered finite for any other reasons. If it were finite, it would be an illusion, and being an illusion, it would not have any potency to create other illusions. Thus, Maya is best regarded as being both real and infinite in the same way that God is usually regarded as being both real and infinite. Among all possible intellectual explanations, the explanation that Maya, like God, is both real and infinite is most acceptable to the intellect of man. Nevertheless, Maya cannot be ultimately true. Wherever there is duality, there is finitehood on both sides. The one thing limits the other. There cannot be two real infinites. There can be two huge entities, but there can be two infinite entities. Correct. There can be two huge entities, but there cannot be two infinite entities. If we have the duality of God and Maya, and if both are regarded as coordinate existence, then the infinite reality of God would be considered as the second part of a duality. Therefore, the intellectual explanation that Maya is real does not have the stamp of final knowledge, though it is the most plausible explanation. Very, very interesting. Now, I never got what Maya as the shadow is, and now I'm getting it. Right? So, anybody wants to comment, happy to take a pause, otherwise I'll continue. Intellectual difficulty in understanding Maya. There are difficulties in regarding Maya as illusory and also as ultimately real. Thus, all attempts of the limited intellect to understand Maya lead to an impasse. On the one hand, if Maya is regarded as finite, it itself becomes illusory, and then it cannot account for the illusory world of finite things. Therefore, Maya has to be regarded as being both real and infinite. On the other hand, if Maya is regarded as being ultimately real, Maya itself becomes a second part of the duality of another infinite reality, namely God. Hence, from this point of view, Maya actually seems to become finite and therefore unreal. So, Maya cannot be ultimately real, though it has to be regarded as such in order to account for the illusory world of finite objects. In whatever manner the limit, okay, next section, Maya as God's shadow. In whatever manner the limited intellect tries to understand Maya, it falls short of true understanding. It is not possible to understand Maya through the limited intellect. It is as unfathomable as God. God is unfathomable, ununderstandable, so is Maya, unfathomable, ununderstandable. Thus, it is said that Maya is God's shadow. Where a person is, there is his shadow also. Where God is, there is this inscrutable Maya. Though God and Maya are inscrutable for the limited intellect working in the domain of duality, they can be thoroughly understood in their true nature in the final knowledge of realization. The enigma of the existence of Maya can never be finally solved until after realization, when it is known that Maya does not exist in reality. Whoa, that was good.
Karthik, if we can give us an example of what is being said right now in reality to understand, will that be possible?
I will welcome the group to do that. I am not able to think of readily an example to explain this. I'm just digesting this whole thing. Kama, any
Well, I
thoughts?
can think of basically like, when you look into the sun is always shining, it's been going on for the last 4.5 billion years.
Mm-hmm.
And there is nothing like day and night. Night is an example of Maya, right? Because the light is always shining. It's just the earth is rotating. Okay. The second thing is when you look directly into the sun, you can't see the shadow. When you turn your back to the sun, you can see your shadow. Okay. That is one way of looking at, and the shadow keeps changing, depending on the orientation of the sun. But you as an individual, in actuality, you are the reality. But the shadow is the reflection of the sun. And another one is like the waking state and the sleep state. In the sleep state, especially in deep sleep state, you are into nothingness, like a divine vacuum. Whereas in the waking state is when we face duality, you know, where we are, basically dealing both with God and Maya. Another example is like the white movie screen, cinema screen in the theater,
I was thinking exactly of that.
and the
Yeah, go
movie.
ahead. Yeah.
So, those are the kind of examples one can kind
Can
of
you
relate.
explain that in detail? Because that's a brilliant example, the white movie screen.
Okay, the white movie screen can be, it's a beautiful analogy. This is from Ramana Maharshi. Two things, the takeaway that I got was, for example, the movie theater is, there and it has the white screen. It's not open 24/7. So you go in, before the movie starts, you watch the white movie screen. Then when the movie starts, people, kind of are engrossed in the movie. You're only watching the movie. You're not aware that, there is a white movie screen. Okay. You're not conscious of it. And then when the movie is over, depending on the type of movie, whether it's a thriller, romance, tragedy, the audience takes that emotion, home. So number one is the white movie screen, does not get affected by any of the scenes on the movie, whether there is a flood, whether there's a volcanic eruption, there's an earthquake, you know, the white movie screen remains the same, whereas people are like looking at the movie, and going through all the emotions. Okay. So the white movie screen doesn't change. It remains by itself when the movie is on. The second thing is that the movie is dependent on the white screen, whereas the white screen is not dependent on the movie. So this is an example of the self, the oversoul Paramatma, which is basically a pure observer witness. Once we understand God speaks and the Advaita Vedanta and all that stuff, then we realize that we are basically a pure observer witness, of all the things that are happening. And personally, I'll tell you my way of looking at it. I look at myself as a walking movie theater with a white movie screen. The moment I wake up in the morning, the movie starts. You're basically going into this reality show. Right now, we are in this forum. And every time we are playing different roles from the time we wake up till the time we go to sleep. So this is the kind of an example that daily we are going through a movie, basically. So I don't know whether it makes sense. Okay, Baba.
I love this example. I love this example. Thank you so much.
I think I loved the best example today was I could relate for Maya is the shadow, right? So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not finally real, but it takes different forms at different times. But the real aspect is the me that's standing between the sun and the shadow, right? Not to be confused. Don't take the physical me to mean anything beyond just for the example of seeing this in the context of Maya alone, right? If you see it in that lens alone, the shadow is a very, very powerful way of understanding Maya, right? So yeah, I think good distinctions made out. Any other questions?
The concept of shadow needs an object to throw a shadow by a light.
Correct.
So God has to be there to give a shadow. So
Yes.
this is so it is due to God. Maya is also due to God. That's why they use the term Leela, I think. So when you cannot explain unless you have realized, at the time of realization or at the level of realization, you don't need an explanation and you can't explain certain things to others who have not reached that level of realization. So that is also in the first sentence in the page here, continuation of the last page, if you read, though God and Maya are inscrutable for the limited intellect working in the domain of duality, they can be, go to the next page, thoroughly understood in the true nature, in the final knowledge of realization. The enigma of the existence of Maya can never be finally solved until after realization, where it is known that Maya does not exist in reality.
Correct.
So Maya doesn't exist in reality, but it creates all the illusion. So this is to be understood. It is very difficult to internalize this concept, I think. So shadow is the one good example. So you have to remember that it is a part of God's play. So if God is there, shadow is there. If you have understood this, you have understood God. So when you
the other way
understand,
around, when you understand God, you'll figure Maya out.
that is the path, in the path. So once you have realized God, shadow is no more of any concern to you.
Correct.
So I think to extend what Doc said, it's very clear here that Maya can never be understood until we achieve God realization, which is in the seventh plane. So up till the sixth plane, where in the sixth plane, the spiritual aspirant, the advanced pilgrim, is able to see God in everything. But there is a duality out there. The individual and the God he sees, the subject and the object. So there is Maya up till the sixth plane, even though the aspirant is able to see God everywhere, So that is also Maya.
Yes, that's also Maya.
Wow. Yeah. Correct. Great. So with that, I will continue. I think this is something that all of us have to think personally and grapple with this through the course of the day. Happy to discuss this as you get these questions. I think this is some deep thought which can be understood at multiple dimensions, multiple examples, maybe some more reading as well if you want. So but I think we can happily discuss this after 24 hours when we have had time to think and internalize this as well. That's my suggestion. So, two states in which Maya does not exist. That's where I'm continuing from. There are two states in which Maya does not exist. In the original unconscious state of reality, there is no Maya, and in the self-conscious or superconscious state of God, there is no Maya. It exists only in God's consciousness of the phenomenal world of duality. That is, when there is consciousness of the gross world, or of the subtle world, or of the mental world. Maya exists when there is no self-consciousness, but only consciousness of the imagined other, and when the consciousness is helplessly dominated by the false categories of duality. Maya exists only from the point of view of the finite. It is only as illusion that Maya exists as a real and infinite creator of unreal and finite things. Okay, I didn't get this. Shall I just try reading it again? If you don't mind.
This is the explanation of state A and B of karma, very
Correct.
clearly explained here.
Correct.
So the unconscious stream which tries to get into the increasing consciousness, there is Maya.
There is Maya. Okay, got it. Got it.
The stream which is already totally conscious doesn't have Maya.
Doesn't have Maya. Okay, got it. Super.
The original unconscious state of reality is the beyond God state.
That doesn't have Maya at all.
Yes, there is no chance
Correct.
of Maya there. Yes.
And
Only
the self-conscious, superconscious state of God is when you realize in the seventh plane.
Yeah.
When you reach nirvana or nirvikalpa samadhi, God consciousness state, and that is the state where there is no Maya.
Correct.
So
Yes.
the original state and the final state of God, there is no Maya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Samadhi.
Your audio is bad, but you can try repeating your question. If it doesn't work, please text it.
Nirvikalp Samadhi.
Ashok, you'll have to.
Yeah, text your question. I hope you're able to hear us well, because if the internet is that bad, so a lot of the ISPs in India have changed the upload speed. So this is a problem many places. The download is very good. So when you're trying to upload, they have restricted it. It used to be 1:1. During the lockdown, they have changed it. Can you just text your question? That will work well.
Yes.
I'll probably wait for a minute if it comes quickly. You're texting it right in the meeting chat, right?
Yes.
We're going to finish the last paragraph.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Knowledge of realization. In the last and the only truth of realization, nothing exists except infinite and eternal God. There, the illusion of finite things as separate from God has vanished, and with it also has vanished Maya, the creator of this illusion. Self-knowledge comes to the soul by looking within and by overcoming Maya. In this self-knowledge, it not only knows that different ego minds and bodies never existed, but also that the entire universe and Maya itself never existed as a separate principle. Whatever reality Maya ever had is now swallowed up in the indivisible being of the one soul. The individualized soul now knows itself to be what it has always been, eternally self-realized, eternally infinite in knowledge, bliss, power, and existence, and eternally free from duality. But this highest form of self-knowledge is inaccessible to the intellect, and it is incomprehensible except to those who have attained the heights of final realization. Okay, so that's ends part 4. Your question ready, Ashok? I don't see it.
So I think, Karthik, you have to go to the avatar now, page
Yeah.
266.
On the physical.
Physical, yeah.
To elaborate Nirvikalp Samadhi.
Yes.
Is there a, you're asking for a elaboration of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Is that right? We heard only that much.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think
Do you want me to answer that, or is it just?
I don't know. Yeah. Ashok is there. No, a lot of these ISPs are playing. Unless you call and ask them, because 80-20 rule, right? 80 people are only watching Netflix and whatever, so they never get into conversations like this. So they're happy to put they're putting the download speed as high and restricting the upload speed, because the max upload is WhatsApp forwards that people can wait, even if it takes a few seconds. So a lot of the ISPs have done this. Okay, so I think we'll have to leave Ashok's question. So with that, we finish Maya and go to the avatar. So on that note, a small note for Kama, we need to get together sometime, and you need to suggest how you want to carry out this little test, because I think it's a good way of confirming understanding. I have some ideas. We'll try to see how we can put together something. I think best way is we'll use the idiom of reality and falsehood itself. So we'll just have true and false statements that people have to confirm. That's it. Right? Just tell us whether this statement is true or false. That's the test. But we'll give you correct statements which will make you think, right?
I will put a rider to that, asking you whether it is an illusion or in realization.
No, we'll put a disclaimer. Only in illusion. That's a good one. Okay, so we are in 266 Avatar. I'll at least read this one page. I think we have time to do that. Consciously or unconsciously, every living creature seeks one thing. In the lower forms of life and in less advanced human beings, the quest is unconscious. In advanced human beings, it is conscious. The object of the quest is called by many names: happiness, peace, freedom, truth, love, perfection, self realization, God realization, union with God. Especially, essentially, it is a search for all of these, but in a special way. Everyone has moments of happiness, glimpses of truth, fleeting experiences of union with God. What they want is to make them permanent. They want to establish an abiding reality in the midst of constant change. This is a
I
natural.
think it's a very important. The last two lines are very important. Applies to all of us.
Yes.
Can you read that again?
Why we are here is just that everyone has moments of happiness, glimpses of truth, fleeting experiences of union with God. What they want is to make them permanent. They want to establish an abiding reality in the midst of constant change. Right? So I think otherwise we will not be motivated to do what we are doing today. Okay? So let me put it that way. Why we are consistently getting on this call at 7:30 is we want to establish that abiding reality in the midst of constant change. We have
So it's a
sensed.
kind of a good selfishness. Good.
Yes, the individualized soul selfishness. Yes.
So it is a sort of an analogy of a hotline, state hotline, not some temporary connections, a permanent hotline.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we're out of time. So we will continue from this para when we meet again tomorrow. Please think about Maya. Maya is something that we have to deal with, and is a good conceptual understanding. It would be helpful. So those of you who can, please read the 4 parts, and those of you who can't, at least think of those broad line summaries and the examples, and we will be happy to spend a few minutes discussing this tomorrow again, just so that we are all on the same page. Thank you very much. Have a great day and have a great week ahead.
Jai
Jai
Baba.
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai
Good
Baba.
everybody.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, Jai
Jai
Baba,
Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.